Hey everybody, Tony D and Little Joan here with a hot take about BLM. I know, again, but BLM has come to South Jersey, and it's been here a little while. But recently, in the South Jersey subreddit, I got into it with some of the local Pineys. I guess you can call this a Piney podcast, and they were touting that some school kids in Haddonfield had raised money for BLM. And I was saying basically that that's not good because they're raising money for Marxists. BLM, their leadership has said openly that they are trained Marxist. Their website, until they got blasted for it, said quite clearly that they were for deconstructing the nuclear family. Their actions belie a lot of Marxist rhetoric and a lot of Marxist, agenda. So they are Marxist. They are training people to be Marxist. And it doesn't surprise me that there are a lot of women involved. And because I said in a video way back about my theory about left versus right being women versus men to some degree, and I modified that somewhat. I think what it is, I think that men, the culture of men versus the culture of women, let's say, the culture of men ran things for a long time because men were physically more capable, just biologically. And that, even through civilization, it was always men that were in charge for the most part. And the strength involved in that often led to, when there was a problem with certain men, that we had to deal with that guy because of his abuse of power. And women didn't necessarily have that. They usually didn't. It was rare, but once in a while they would. But they had indirect power, but not real political power for the most part. Few exceptions throughout history you can name. And because of that, because women rarely had the power, when they did get the power, they tended to be very competent because they had to be, right? When you're the lesser party, as the Republicans were, when Trump sort of rose up, and now we have all these fairly impressive Republicans who are gung-ho to really do stuff. That was true for the Democrats 50, 60 years ago. They were the new dynamic party out of power, and they wanted your vote, so they did things to get your vote. So female leaders in the great past had to really shine in order to make their power bases work, or else nobody would give them the time of day. You couldn't have a half-ass power person who was female back then. Now we have a situation in which women have fully entered the political arena, and that's mostly because now we have incompetent boobs who are women who have entered the political arena. Hello, AOC, looking at you and the squad. They're corrupt. They're they're dumb at what they do, but they've gotten there because now whatever barriers society had put up, and there were more social barriers than anything else, and the advent of technology, mostly the pill, allowed them to gain political power. But unlike men, they didn't learn from their abuses. Okay? Most men understand the concept of the limits of their power. And here's how I discovered mine. I was always a big kid. I was so tall, and I've told this story before, I think, that I walked into the school nurse in 4th grade, and they went, "What are you doing in here?" And I was like, "What?" And they thought I was one of the maintenance guys because I was so tall. And then they realized that I was just that tall kid, and I was upset, and they were like, "Oh, I'm sorry, honey." So I was always physically, I mean, I was like a head and a half taller than most kids. We used to play, a roughhouse game called Kill the Man, where basically they would just give me the ball and like four kids would try to tackle me and they couldn't. I would just move with them because I was so much larger than them at that time. Then when I got into junior high, most of the kids caught up to me, at least to a good degree. And, I never worried about fights. No one ever challenged me to a fight because they take one look at me and go, oh my God, no. But then in junior high, this kid decided, he was an upperclassman. He decided to pick on me and he challenged me to a fight. And at first I was like, okay, I guess. I guess I'm just going to push you over and that'll be it. But I quickly realized that he was maybe he was a little taller or about the same height as me. He was definitely more aggressive, and I was really worried he was going to beat the crap out of me. So he challenged me to a fight. We had a place to fight on school grounds, or just off school grounds, in an alley near a sporting goods store. And I knew if I got back in there, he could potentially corner me and just beat the crap out of me, and nobody was going to save me. So I decided to call him out on the front lawn of the school as people were leaving for the day because I knew eventually somebody would break it up. So I called him out because I had sensed that maybe I don't know what I'm doing. And because I never really learned to fight. I was just so big, I could just go, and it was over. So this kid's like, and I'm just like standing there like, what's going to happen here? Well, he popped me in the chops. And in that moment, I was like, uh-oh. I have bitten off more than I could chew here. This kid was a good fighter. I mean, he was. One punch, I knew he was going to beat the crap out of me if I fought him. So I backed away, and since people were leaving for the day, there were crowds of kids, and they kind of moved in between us, and he lost me in the crowd, and I snuck away and went home. And he never bothered me again, but that was it. That was the fight. But on that day, I understood the limits of my power physically, finally. I understood there was always a guy who could beat me up and that I had to be a little more careful, right? At that moment, it's like, okay, maybe you got to compromise. Maybe you have to not always do everything that you want to do. Maybe you have to deal with other people and whatnot. The reason I tell this story is I think a lot of women don't have a story like that. Some do. I just saw a vicious fight on the internet between two women, two heavyset women, in Hold My Fries subreddit. And one of the women just gets her face, she's bleeding from the face. And she learned, and she's young, they're both young. She learned an important lesson that day. Like, maybe I shouldn't mess with everybody. Maybe resorting to physical violence is a bad idea. But I don't think most women learn that lesson because I think the negative side, and there's positive and negatives to the culture of women and men. That's what I was thinking today. The negative side for the culture, the positive sides are obvious, right? Your mom and, being nice and taking care of people and being self-sacrificing. But you can take that too far. You can enable people and suffocate them and make them incapable of doing things for themselves. And I think the culture of women has this problem with taking responsibility. That's the negative side of it. Now, some women understand that. They do take responsibility. But there are many who don't or never learn that lesson. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people now who are being raised that way. And so you have these female politicians who maybe perhaps have not learned that lesson. AOC doesn't have kids. I don't even think she's married yet. And if she did, she'd probably begin to realize that, well, I can't totally baby this kid. I can't totally make the kid dependent on me. He's got to do something for himself. He's got to put his clothes on by himself. He's got to clean up his toys. You got to teach people responsibility and let them go. But the left side of politics, when it's bad, says, no, we're going to take everything. We're going to be your mommy. And we're going to tell you what to do and when to do it. And it's too much. And they don't understand that even though that sounds like a good idea, it inevitably makes people weaker and makes the country, it just spirals down into, well, you need help, I'll give you too much help, now you need more help, I'll give you more help, and it just spirals down. So these kids in I believe it was Haddonfield raising money for BLM don't understand what they're raising money for. They think they're just raising something money for a good cause. BLM is no longer a good cause, if it ever was. I mean, maybe the original movement, you could argue, was. BLM is run by Marxists. They have openly declared that reparations, or that looting is reparations, support the criminals. They have said all sorts of outrageous things, and they frequently protest and loot with Antifa, which is a dangerous organization. Now, does everybody in BLM and Antifa see eye to eye on everything? No, but BLM has no compunction about pushing forward and gaining power, because they believe in, by gaining all that power, they can fix everything. But they won't. They'll just fix everything for themselves, but everybody else can go pound sand. And that's what happens in these Marxist and socialist countries. People gain power, and then everybody's miserable, and then the government just keeps saying, well, it's not our fault, it's somebody else's fault, right? And again, that's a female women, a culture of women negative of, it's not my fault, somebody else's fault. It's somebody else's fault. Outside forces are what makes our government not work, is what makes the Cuban buses not run on time. It's what makes, our food distribution system bad. No, it's rife with corruption because you've made everybody dependent upon you, and now they want you to deliver and you can't. And everybody is taking advantage of the system that you refuse to operate in accordance with the natural laws of human beings. So, like, I remember one time I had a relative who didn't understand why her two boys were constantly fighting. She interpreted that as they don't love each other. And I said, no, they're boys, they're roughhousing. And that's how they communicate. And she could not grasp the concept and insisted that the boys, hug and be nice to each other. I mean, these were young kids. And I understand that sort of motherly, want. You want your kids to get along. But I kept trying to tell her, they don't really hate each other. They're just boys pushing each other and having a good time. And yeah, they may take it too far and hurt each other on occasion, but ultimately they don't really mean it. It's not like, and she could not grasp that simple concept. She just couldn't. She just wanted everybody to get along at all times, and that was it. And she would have been a terrible person to be a political leader, because nothing would have been good enough, right? I mean, she would have been, well, we have to constantly fix this. We have to dump more money into this program because it's not perfect. And I think that's part of the utopian vision that drives the left, that drives the Marxists. This idea that, no, we can fix it all. We can make it all perfect. We can give everybody a job. We can give everybody a house, an education, and there will not be any problems whatsoever. Now, if you confront them with that, they'll say, oh, yes, of course there'll be problems. They don't really see, there are problems and there are problems. Like, the Marxists would list problems as being, well, maybe somebody didn't get the right housing, but they still get housing. Or maybe they didn't get the right education, but they still get education. Or maybe they didn't get to pursue their dreams fully, but they still got to pursue them. When you're a kid and you work your mom, for more candy or to stay up late or whatever, you tend to prey upon her nurturing nature in order to get what you want. You say, oh, Mom, you're such a great mom, and you made such a nice dinner. Would it be okay if I clean the dishes? Oh, that's so nice of you. Thank you. And I'm going to stay up an hour late. Oh, yes, of course you can. Stuff like that where you butter up your mom, show her the love, and then boom, you hit her up for the favor that you're trying to get out of her. It's manipulative, but like people do it. It's not like you don't love your mom if you're trying to get over on her once in a while, but that translates into what happens in leftist countries. That corruption is people getting over on the government. Oh, we got a truckload of bananas here. You're supposed to get 4 crates. Oh, well, we're really big supporters of the party here. Maybe give us a 5th crate of bananas, just because we're such good party workers. Oh, all right, here you go. I'm friends with so and so in the Politburo. Oh, well, why don't you say so here? That's the kind of stuff that's going to happen, and it just gets worse and worse as you go on. That's why in the United States we're a nation of laws. It's based on reason and logic, and that reason and logic is, well, it's supposed to be immutable. You're not supposed to mess with it. You're supposed to just follow the rules, and everybody knows the rules. So if something goes wrong, you could say, well, look, those are the rules, dude. Why didn't you think this through before you budgeted your money for the week or whatever? You'll come back from this if you're having a problem, or, and there are people that need help on occasion. I'm not saying we should kick them to the curb, but, in general, people need to suffer the consequences of their own actions in an individualistic society. What the leftists keep trying to do is saying, no, 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 no. We'll make sure those consequences never come because mommy will take care of you. And these kids raising money for BLM, they don't understand what they're, if you ask them, if you gave them the truth, because unfortunately Marxists and the left side of politics has to be very deceptive in order to get you on board. If you said to them, oh, you raised the money for Black Lives Matter, so would you like somebody else other than your mommy and daddy to raise you from now on? They'd look at you horrified and go, what are you talking about? Well, BLM, they're interested in the deconstruction of the nuclear family. Wouldn't you rather be raised in a foster home with other children and never see your parents again? They would object to that. They think they're just helping poor black people somewhere. Just some nebulous poor people that they've never met. They're not. They're contributing to BLM, which then processes the money through Act Blue, which is a Democratic-run donation site. And then maybe the money goes back to BLM. Maybe it goes to the Democrats, or who knows what it goes for. You can't really trace it. But where it's probably not going to random poor black people to get them out of prison or whatever. If they raised money for that, like if they raised money for a specific person who was in jail unjustly, or who had been injured by the cops or arrested by the cops, or God forbid killed by the cops, and you were raising money for the family, that would be a noble cause. But to raise it for BLM and just assume, oh, all the money goes to a good place, that's wrong. That's a grift. BLM, to me, is nothing but a grift at this point, because, and it's even worse than that, because they are Marxists, and they openly proclaim that. These kids don't understand what Marxism is, nor should we teach them to embrace it. Unless you teach them all of Marxism. See, the Marxists, when they teach you Marxism, they just teach you, well, everybody will be taken care of, and it'll all be wonderful. They don't teach you the parts where Marxism and communism never have worked, ever. They don't teach you the parts where, well, in this case, 100 million people died, but this time it'll work. They don't teach you that part. They're not teaching these children that. Instead, they're playing a game, just like the people who argued with me play a game with words and emotions and Well, don't you like black people? Don't you want to donate to BLM? You're not a racist, are you? That's the manipulation. And the person I'm arguing with, who, let me guess, is probably a woman, is so emotionally taken over in our thread that she thinks I'm a MAGA hat wearing racist, all the tropes, and that I don't care one whit, even though I stated specifically, like, you shouldn't teach children Marxism. These people can fight racism without giving money to BLM, and that's true. You can fight racism without donating one dime to BLM. You can fight it yourself by doing non-racist things, or you can donate the money to a more worthy cause. You could donate the money to black colleges or whatever. Wherever you want to donate your money. Now, if you want to donate to BLM, that's your choice. But you have to understand what it is. And I would argue that most people don't understand what BLM is. I will put the link in the description if you haven't seen it. It's part of the Young Ripa podcast where he goes over it. And you'll see one of the leaders of BLM say, we are trained Marxist. Okay? So if you haven't seen that clip and you want to show it to your friends, there you go. But just had to get that one out and about because I'm so sick of people talking about BLM, and it's finally trickled down into South Jersey, and these Karens are letting their little girls raise money for BLM because we're so wonderful and woke and we're virtue signaling. You're not. You're raising money for Marxists. If you hate capitalism, yes, join BLM. If you want to fight racism, fight it. Don't give your money to that organization, I say.